Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on Akashvani. This is Saira Mujtaba, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Foreign Ministers meeting of Shanghai Cooperation Organization gets underway in Goa. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar holds bilateral talks with Chinese, Russian and Uzbek counterparts on the sidelines. India offers assured prosperity and growth to U.S. companies with recent policy reforms, says Union Minister Piyush Goyal. Nearly 3,600 Indians evacuated so far from conflict-hit Sudan under Operation Kaveri. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman asked Asian Development Bank to focus on climate financing for sustainable development. Russia says US was behind Kremlin drone attack. Washington denies accusation. Heavy rains, floods killed at least 136 people in Rwanda and Uganda. And South Korea to provide $3 billion loan to Bangladesh for metro line, CNG buses and railway signaling system. And now the news in detail. A two-day meeting of foreign ministers of Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) got underway in Goa on Thursday. Foreign ministers of 8 nations, including Pakistan and China, are attending the key meeting. India took over the chairmanship of the SCO grouping in September last year. On the sidelines of the SCO meet, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar held bilateral talks with his Chinese, Russian and Uzbek counterparts. More from our correspondent.
A detailed discussion with the State Councillor and Foreign Minister of China Queen Gang on India-China bilateral relationship was done. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said that the focus remains on resolving outstanding issues and ensuring peace and tranquility in the border areas. Dr. S. Jaishankar informed that the comprehensive review of India-Russia bilateral relation, global and multilateral cooperation was taken with the Foreign Minister of Russia Sergei Lavrov. He appreciated Russia's support for India's SCO presidency and also discussed issues pertaining to the G20 and BRICS. Dr. S. Jaishankar welcomed the Foreign Minister of Uzbekistan Bakhtiar Saidov on his visit to the India. He appreciated Uzbekistan's strong support for the India's SCO presidency. He expressed confidence in India's bilateral partnership with Uzbekistan in different domains. Tushar Jadhav for AIR News, Panaji, Goa.
Earlier, Dr. Jaishankar also held a bilateral meeting with SCO Secretary General Jiang Ming and appreciated his support for India's SCO presidency. The SCO has Russia, India, China, Pakistan and 4 Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan as its members. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Agenda and Concerns of Shanghai Cooperation Organization Foreign Ministers Meeting. The participants are Strategic Analyst Professor Harsh V. Pant and Akashvani Correspondent Om Vesh Upadhyay.
And to begin the discussion, Mr. Pant, I want you to outline the significance of India hosting the SEO Summit. And please share with our listeners what is the theme of India's chairmanship of SEO this year.
This year, India has the presidency of the chairmanship of the SCO, and this meeting that is happening today and tomorrow is the foreign ministers meeting where the 8 member states of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization are meeting in Goa. And this meeting is likely to set the agenda for the Leaders Summit that will be held in July. So in some ways, this is an important meeting because foreign ministers will lay down the agenda for the leaders later on to converge and to discuss. And in that context, the theme of India's chairmanship is Secure SCO, which basically underscores India's desire to part of a platform like SCO in a part of the world like Central Asia, which has been riven by many challenges, to ensure that there is an element of security in its widest possible dimensions and how that security can be undertaken, that security role can be undertaken by the SCO in Central Asia. We should know that India has had very strong links with this part of the world. Historically, civilizational links, it is part of India's extended neighborhood. And in that sense, India has for a very long time underscored that the principles on which it would like to pursue its relationship with the SCO, like respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, like non-interference in internal affairs, like mutual understanding and respect, all of those are fundamental in the way India looks at its own role in the SCO as well as the role of SCO in managing regional issues and managing regional problems.
So on the line of SEO summit and India doing the chairmanship, what's the tentative program and key objectives of the SEO foreign ministers meeting?
See, for India, it is often forgotten, when we talk these days about India being an Indo-Pacific player or India being an Indo-Pacific power, which is basically a maritime zone. It is often forgotten that India is also a continental power. So India's northern flank, India's northern territories are increasingly important for India because a lot of the challenges that India has traditionally faced remain in the northern frontier. And that means that for India, the focus has always been on issues like extremism, terrorism, and radicalization emanating from Central Asia and becoming part of South Asia and challenging the South Asian stability. Those challenges India has always felt can be managed if SCO member states work together, respecting the principles enunciated before and taking a cooperative spirit forward. So for India, of course, at the regional level, this is going to be an important part of the agenda which India would push forward. The other aspects, of course, are that India is likely to take forward will remain how do you enhance economic relationship in the region? How do you ensure that there is enough connectivity in the region? Because with connectivity comes trade, with connectivity comes relationship. So how do you make sure that economic interactions, people-to-people interactions, societal interactions, and political interactions continue to get enhanced as a result of this? And of course, a lot of the effort that India has put in under its presidency of the SCO have to do with technology and how technology can play a role in enhancing governance. And India certainly would like to use or share some of its experience in digital infrastructure and digital governance and take it forward to Central Asian countries.
Absolutely.
And share that with Central Asian countries. So all of these will be part of the agenda.
You mentioned about that India will focus more on modernization of grouping focused on advanced technology and digital infrastructure. How do you see that? Can you talk about that in detail?
I think what we are looking at is across the world these days is this growth in aspirations about good governance. Whichever part you look at, people want good governance, people want policymakers to perform and do better, and governance to be taken to the last mile, to the last person in the queue. And I think what India has shown in the last few years in particular is that the digital transformation that has happened in India, the digital infrastructure that has been created in India, has benefited some of the weakest, poorest members of Indian society, of Indian economy. And that, I think, is something that is quite remarkable about India's story, transformation story. And that is something that I think a lot of the countries also are looking at India as an exemplar, as something that can be followed. Now, if you think of how, despite COVID, India managed to do direct bank transfers, how we have increased financial inclusion, how we have expanded, how many people we have brought into financial architecture, how we have integrated them through digital means and through technological means. That is a remarkable story of a society that despite being poor and despite facing many of the challenges, has been able to overcome this particular challenge. And I think therefore for a lot of the countries in the developing world, this is something that they want to invite, from. India can do it. If India can deliver on this, then this is an experience that India can certainly share with other countries who would also want to emulate that part of Indian performance. And I think that is what India wants to bring to the table, whether it is as part of the SCO, whether it is also part of the G20. On both platforms, we have seen this agenda being put forward because this is something where India has done well and where India has shown that you don't have to be very rich to reap the benefits of technology.
And here to mention that Dr. S. Jaishankar will also hold separate bilateral talks with his Chinese and Russian counterparts in Goa. There are speculations that India might put up India-China relations that cannot be normal unless there is peace in border issues with China side, and with Russia it is more on the trade side. What can we expect from these two bilateral talks, Dr. Pant?
With China, I think one can safely predict that what happened last week when the defense ministers of the two nations met is going to be repeated because India has made its position very clear that unless there is peace and tranquility along the border, unless China restores status quo ante on the border, unless China can credibly show that it is moving seriously towards resolving the border problems, it's very unlikely that the relations between India and China are going to become normal, because that is something that because of China they became abnormal. Because of China we have seen a problem. So the onus is on China to make the first move now. And because China unilaterally changed the status quo along the border with India, it is up to China now to decide what it wants to do. So I think the same conversation that happened between the defense ministers last week will happen between Indian foreign ministers this week, and with India making it very clear the limits of India-China relationship at the moment. With Russia, it's going to be slightly more forward-looking, because I think many in India are looking at the crisis in Ukraine as to what is happening in Ukraine, how the Ukraine crisis is going to evolve, what is going to be Russia's position, as well as the coming together of Russia and China. I think India as a long-term partner, as a historical partner of Russia, would expect Russia to explain to India how Russia-China relations are evolving and whether or not it will have any impact on Russia-India relations, because India relies on Russia for its defense supplies. India also works very closely with Russia when it comes to Central Asia, and therefore we are talking of the SEO. In Central Asia, India and Russia have worked together, especially after American troops left Afghanistan in 2021. We have seen a greater degree of information sharing, intelligence sharing between India and Russia in terms of managing terrorism, extremism and radicalism, that part of the world. So I think certainly India and Russia are going to have a conversation which tends to happen between friends. But I think there are many in India who are looking at with a degree of nervousness as Russia and China relations are becoming closer. And I think some amount of explanation, perhaps, or some amount of engagement on this question with Russia is important for India.
And in one of the agenda, India is also in process to add English as an official language in SEO, as earlier it is only Russian and Mandarin as the official and working languages. What's your say on this?
Yes, so that is an important, I think, issue for India, because India has been putting this issue on the agenda since 2020. And, we know that India and Pakistan both became members of the SEO in 2017. Now, the only two official languages that you have at the moment, working languages, are Russian and Mandarin. Now, till the time you had Russia, China and Central Asia, perhaps this was all right. But now with India as part of the SEO, certainly India would like a language to be included that reflects, I think, where India is coming from, and therefore India has been pushing for the addition of English as the official language of communication. And I think that certainly India is going to again push forward this time, which I think is an important point that India is making, that you cannot have the functioning of an organization should reflect its structure. If the structure changes, then the functioning also should change.
Dr. Pant, earlier to the SEO Foreign Ministers meet, the SEO Council of National Coordinators met from 29th of April to 3rd of May. Can you also share some insights on what were the key outcomes of that meeting?
See, national coordinators basically, are supposed to manage the SEO meeting. So in that sense, what they were doing during the national coordinators meeting was preparing for the meetings of the leaders who will come. So when you have the heads of government meeting later on, the coordinators primarily try to look at the logistics and the functioning of these various meetings, and they look at how various aspects of broader organizational activities. So I think what they were trying to do was they were trying to basically review the documents that will be perhaps presented now at the ministerial meeting, because this is a process of, you have coordinators meeting, then the ministerial meeting, and then you have the summit. So that's how these processes evolve. So basically, once the coordinators meet, then they prepare the ground for the ministerial meeting, and the ministers then prepare the ground for the leaders level summit. So in that context, the National Coordinators meeting is basically the ground zero for the functioning of the SEO annually.
Dr. Pant, in the very concluding question, I want to take your opinion on this, that with the SEO chairmanship, India already holds the G20 presidency at the same time. So can we say that the world is looking at India more like a world leader? And what role now India has to play in order to be the Vishwaguru?
I think both G20 and SEO presidencies are important insofar as they reflect India's desire to play a leading role on the international platform. And both of these very important platforms in some ways allow India to put its own side of the story on the global stage. And the world, of course, is looking at India with great degree of expectations today, because India has shown the world that, despite being a multicultural, multi-ethnic democracy, it has a stable polity. It continues to be the fastest growing major economy in the world. So in that sense, at a time when major powers in the world are either consumed with their own internal problems or, like China, are attacking the institutions that exist, India is trying to play a very constructive role in the evolution of the global order. And therefore, for many countries in the world, India is a voice of reason. India is a voice that makes sense. India is a voice that can bring countries together rather than increasing the polarization that exists at the moment in international relations. So I think the presidency of these two platforms, G20 and SEO, not only gives India an opportunity to shape global agenda, but also is being viewed by many members of the international community as a time when India's leadership perhaps should also lead the world towards greater consensus away from the polarization of the day.
And you shared very insightful information with us. Thank you so much, Dr. Pant, for joining us today on Akashvani.
Thank you.
That was our hotspot section, and now in some more news. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal on Thursday said, India offers assured prosperity and growth to U.S. companies with recent policy reforms. During his inaugural address at the American Chambers of Commerce in India's 31st Annual General Meeting in New Delhi, Mr. Goyal talked about diversifying and deepening India-US trade and investment ties for mutual growth and prosperity. He expressed hope that more US-based corporations will work together with Indian companies in the near future. The minister encouraged companies from the US to establish their base in India and expand to newer frontiers like the markets of Africa and Southeast Asia. Mr. Goyal noted that the bilateral trade between India and the US has been the highest in the last couple of years. He added that it is aimed to increase multifold in the coming years. India has evacuated around 3,600 Indians from conflict-hit Sudan under Operation Kaveri so far. In a series of tweets, the Embassy of India in Khartoum said, one of the most Herculean tasks of bringing Indians stranded in Al-Fashir in Sudan was achieved on Thursday. Our correspondent has the details.
The Embassy of India in Khartoum said in a series of tweets that it mobilized its resources and coordinated with various stakeholders in conflict zones to ensure safe travel for Indian citizens over an arduous journey of over 1,800 kilometers. 2 buses from El Fashir in western Sudan carrying 80 Indians reached Port Sudan safely after traveling for more than 48 hours. The embassy has mobilized and facilitated the movement of 67 buses from various parts of Sudan to reach Port Sudan. So far, Indians have moved out of Port Sudan using 5 Indian naval ships and 16 Indian Air Force aircraft, including one from Wadi Saidna Military Air Base. Suparna Saikya, Akashvani News, Delhi.
India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant has said that the tourism sector is not only a driver of growth but also a driver of job creation and employment. He said that India will be the youngest country in the world by 2047 with an average age of population between 30 and 31. At that time, India will be the provider of almost 25% of the workforce in the world. Addressing the gathering at the India Tourism Conference 2023 in New Delhi on Thursday, Mr. Kant informed that Indian tourists are driving growth in countries like France, Switzerland, Malaysia, Singapore and Thailand. He said that Indian tourism will get a boost if every state creates unique products and positions its products in the global market. This is Akashvani giving you the world news. Welcome back. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has stressed on the need for a robust Asian Development Bank or ADB that adopts a transformational rather than incremental approach for sustainable and resilient regional development. She said this while addressing the meeting of the Board of Governors of ADB in Seoul. The minister urged the ADB to explain its plan for meeting its ambition with more concessional climate finance, especially to middle-income economies like India, whose economic progress is consistent with the pursuit of its net zero goal by 2070. The finance minister said that the Indian economy is on a relatively stronger trajectory despite prevailing economic uncertainties due to the government's proactive policies and empowerment-led development. She added that the Indian government continues to focus on strategic and integrated infrastructure development driven by unprecedented capital expenditure and building economic competitiveness while integrating with global value chains. The minister assured India's continued support to ADB in all its endeavour, including that of climate finance. Indian-Australian Diaspora Foundation, IADF, is set to host a grand community reception in honour of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ahead of the Quad Leaders Summit slated to take place in Sydney this month. Prime Minister Modi will attend the event in Sydney on the 23rd of May, a day ahead of the Quad Leaders Summit. The IADF has already seen an overwhelming response to the event, including registration by more than 20,000 members to attend the event. More than 300 diaspora organizations from various social, cultural, linguistic, business, professional and religious backgrounds have registered to become welcome partners for the reception. Cultural programs, singing and dance performances are being planned for the grand reception for Prime Minister. During the function, to showcase the rich cultural heritage of India and how it's thriving under the Indians settled in these countries. Ahead of Australia's visit, Prime Minister Modi will be travelling to Japan and Papua New Guinea to attend the G7 Summit and Forum for India-Pacific Islands Cooperation Summit, respectively. The Indian-Australian Diaspora Foundation is a non-profit organisation that aims to promote and celebrate the diverse Indian culture in Australia. It provides a platform for the Indian diaspora in Australia to come together, network, and promote cultural and community events. Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Singh Thakur on Thursday alleged that certain old world media houses have been running a systematic smear campaign against India, unable to digest the global rise of India and its turning into an economic powerhouse. In a tweet, Mr. Thakur accused New York Times of writing fact-free and fabricated anti-India stories and misusing the podium of UNESCO to distort the facts. He said that in India, law takes its own course if someone does something wrong. He added that merely claiming the status of the newsroom does not grant immunity from unlawful deeds. Russia accused the United States on Thursday of being behind a drone attack on the Kremlin, which Russia claims was an attempt to kill President Vladimir Putin. The White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby also said that the Russian claims were false and that Washington does not encourage or enable Ukraine to strike outside its borders. Russia has said with increasing frequency that it sees the US as a direct participant in the war. The US denies that, saying it is arming Ukraine to defend itself and retake territory that Moscow has seized illegally in more than 14 months of war. Earlier, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky also denied the Russian allegations. The Russian President's office said drones targeting the complex were disabled by electronic radar assets and added that President Putin was not in the complex at the time of the alleged attack. The United States Food and Drug Administration approved the world's first respiratory syncytial virus or RSV vaccine that is meant for older adults. However, the vaccine still needs approval from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention before it can be rolled out to the public. In a statement, senior FDA official Peter Marks said that today's approval of the first RSV vaccine is an important public health achievement to prevent a disease which can be life-threatening. The vaccine was approved for people aged 60 and older after it was found 83% effective against diseases caused by RSV and more than 94% effective against severe diseases. The RSV infection is more common among children, but at times it also attacks the elderly population. RSV normally causes mild, cold-like symptoms, but it can be serious for people with weak immune systems. Flooding and landslides triggered by heavy rain have killed at least 129 people in Rwanda and 6 in Uganda, authorities said on Wednesday, as rescuers hunted survivors trapped in homes. In a statement, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame said his government was helping affected people, including with temporary relocations. Rwanda and Uganda have been experiencing heavy and sustained rains since late March. Landslides have been reported in other elevated areas of Uganda, like Kasese near the Rwenzori Mountains, where floods destroyed homes and displaced hundreds. South Korea will provide up to $3 billion to Bangladesh for the construction of its metro line or MRT Line 4, procurement of CNG buses and modernization of the railway signalling system. A new framework arrangement was signed on Thursday at Incheon, said an official release from the Embassy of South Korea in Bangladesh. The signing ceremony for the $3 billion concessional loan from the Economic Development Cooperation Fund for the year 2023 through 2027 was held on the occasion of the 56th Annual General Meeting of the Board of Governors of ADB in Korea. With the signing of the new framework arrangement, Bangladesh has become the second largest recipient of Korea's official development aid (ODA) across the globe. So far, the Korean government has supported 30 development projects with an aggregate amount of $1.7 billion through the EDCF. In some business news, the market bounced back after a day of weaknesses in India. Key domestic indices on Thursday witnessed gains to close at around 1%. The BSE Sensex closed near the 61,750 mark, while the NSE Nifty settled above the 18,250 level. The rupee appreciates 3 paise against the US dollar. A report.
The Sensex rose 556 points to finish at 61,749. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange also surged 166 points to end at 18,256. Asian stock markets ended up except South Korea's Kospi Index, which reduced by 0.1%. On the contrary, Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained 1.3%. China's Shanghai Composite Index rose 0.8%. Singapore's Straits Times added 0.2% and Japan's Nikkei ended 0.1%. The European markets were trading down in intraday trade. Oil prices rose but were unable to claw back much of the week's more than 8% decline as demand concerns in major consuming countries continue to weigh. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $72.60 per barrel. Back home, the gold prices at the multi-commodity exchange for June contracts were trading at 61,315 rupees per 10 grams. Silver was trading at around 76,335 rupees per kilogram for May contracts. And at the forex market, the rupee appreciated 3 paise to close at 81 rupees and 80 paise against the US currency. Rajesh Lake for World News, All India Radio.
And now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Financial Times writes, European Union centre-right joins backlash against bloc's green agenda. The Wall Street Journal reports the end of Title 42 border policy puts migrants in a quandary. The Straits Times reports China urges high vigilance over NATO expansion in Asia. And Le Monde reports Italian Foreign Minister cancels Paris trip over migration spat. And now a quick look at the headlines once again. Foreign Ministers meeting of SEO gets underway in Goa. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar holds bilateral talks with Chinese, Russian and Uzbek counterparts on the sidelines. India offers assured prosperity and growth to US companies with recent policy reforms, says Union Minister Piyush Goyal. Nearly 3,600 Indians evacuated so far from conflict-hit Sudan under Operation Kaveri. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman asked Asian Development Bank to focus on climate financing for sustainable development. Russia says US was behind Kremlin drone attack. Washington denies accusation. Heavy rain floods killed at least 136 people in Rwanda and Uganda. And South Korea to provide $3 billion loan to Bangladesh for metro lines, CNG buses and railway signalling system. And now before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan by artists from Ghana. with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.